So I'm going to share something about Christy with her permission this morning that you may not know about her. Um, Christy is a really great artist, and she has been doing a lot of paintings as of late. She started doing this on one of her retreats a while ago, and she's just kept after it. But I want to show you one of her paintings this morning because I think it plays directly into our conversation. What she does, you may have heard of an artist named Seurat who takes all these little dots
Mhm.
and paints with the dots. And if
Totally.
you just looked up close to the dot, Lori, I'm sure knows about this, and I see some of the rest of you nodding your heads as well. If you just look at the dot, you're not going to be able to see that much. Or if you just look at a cluster of dots in the painting, you have to back up away from it to see how beautiful it is and how all these dots come together to make the whole. And so I want to show you what Christy does. This is one of Christie's paintings, and you can see there's a kind of shimmer to the silver paint that she's used. But she sits and meditatively paints with these dots, and you can see the individual dots. But if you pull it back, they make these beautiful swirls. And she has a whole collection of these paintings on our wall over here. And I have to admit, I just sit and look at them, and sometimes I follow the dots, or sometimes I follow a part, or I look at the whole, and I always see something a little bit different. I also like the depth that this has. It pulls you in as you go around the swirls. And so I want to share that with you this morning because we're going to be talking about how the dots and the shards and the fragments and the pieces come together to make the whole this morning. And we are at a time in our nation and in our lives where there's a lot of focus on dots and that the dots are different than each other. And there's a lot of othering, and we're not seeing the whole. And these scriptures that we're going to get into this morning guide us in a very different direction than that. And so I want to invite you into that this morning and to be thinking about maybe you have art in your house that's stained glass or mosaic, or maybe you have made art with paintbrushes or the strokes of a pencil, or maybe you bring words together when you write. If you take one word, it's not going to give you the context of the whole poem or the whole journal entry that you're writing. So I want you to think about this because it is part of your life and it's really important. I want to begin this morning with a word from Reverend Nadia Bowles-Weber. She says, Jesus seemed to want connection with those around him, not separation. He touched human bodies deemed unclean as if they were themselves holy. Dead little girls, lepers, menstruating women. People of his day were disgusted that Jesus' disciples would eat with unwashed hands, and they tried to shame him for it. But he responded, "It is not what enters the mouth that makes one unclean, but what comes out of it that defiles." And I want you to underline this next sentence 4 times and put it on your refrigerator. He was loyal to the law, just not at the expense of the people. Loyal to the law, but not at the expense of the people. He kept violating boundaries of decency to get to the people on the other side of the boundary, those who had been wounded by it. He cared about real holiness, the connection of things human and divine, the coming together of that which is formerly set apart. So I want you to notice here the coming together of the parts that make up the whole. Now, I don't want to be too hard on the Pharisees here. We've talked about the Pharisees a lot, and every one of us here has a little bit of Pharisee in us. So we have to watch out for those tendencies. We drop into this story with the Pharisees concerned about tradition. And the Pharisees were very big on certain traditions, and they loved to honor the very public laws around table fellowship and around eating. And so we drop into this conversation with them concerned about the disciples not doing the hand washing rituals of the elders. And this is around washing hands before you eat. And so it wasn't just about cleanliness, it was like a public display of that indicated that they were part of the Pharisee tradition. You see that they were doing it in public, and so people would see them and say, "Oh, they're Pharisees," which is sort of a way to separate oneself. And there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself, unless it becomes too much about the separating and about the display. And I think this is what Jesus is getting at here when he has pretty strong words for them. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. There's that word kardia again. We've dealt with that from lots of different directions. But if you'll notice at the end of the bulletin where I put the little blurbs from Strong's in about the Greek words, that kardia is used a lot in the Bible, but never once is kardia referring to this pump. It's referring to this metaphorical sense of heart, of having heart and compassion and alignment with the values and teachings of the tradition. See, he's going against the tradition here. He's saying, don't just do the things of the parts of the tradition that people can see and that make you look good. It has to do with what's in here, too. So notice that word heart, kardia. Their hearts are far from me. They're out of alignment. They're just doing the visual stuff. In vain they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. Now, this is the part of the scripture that's really important to set up for the next part. Jesus said, listen and understand. It's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but it is what comes out of the mouth that defiles. I want you to remember that when you're thinking of writing that pithy response on somebody's post on the internet. I want you to think about that, about where your heart is in the midst of that. I want you to think about what is coming out of your mouth, and not just your mouth, but what we're getting at here is, what are your actions? How are you representing? What identity are you showing in the world? We are called in the midst of this national crisis to embody the values of Jesus Christ. We have to be careful what comes out of our mouths. We have to be careful about living in alignment. And when I'm talking about alignment, I'm talking about living compassionately, loving God and our neighbors as ourselves, loving our immigrant neighbors, loving our trans neighbors, the LGBTQIA neighbors, everyone who is under attack right now in our nation. We are called to be compassionate toward those who are being othered, who are being separated out. So all you can see is the dot and not the picture. I freaked the camera out when I did that. But not the whole picture. Not the wholeness. This is what we're going for here. Jesus is all about wholeness. Now, I think it's really interesting that the story about this unnamed, again, we have an unnamed woman. The gospel is full of unnamed women. Sometimes it's good to bring the identity of the dot forward so we can know a little bit more about that person and how they interact with the whole. That's what diversity, equity, and inclusion is about. We learn more about the individual while rooted in the compassionate values of Jesus Christ. And by doing so, we learn more about the whole. So I want you to notice what happens. And if this story, if you were listening as Roz read it and going, what did that say? Or what? What? And it was making you uncomfortable, we're going to get into that. So Jesus left this place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. This is north. Just then a Canaanite woman, unnamed, from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." She's a desperate mama. Do you hear that energy? Some of you know that energy. But he did not answer her at all, and his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Get rid of her, because she keeps shouting after us. She's making us uncomfortable. Get rid of her." They don't say, "God, Jesus, do you want to do something for her or heal her?" Because he hasn't done anything, which is curious. Send her away. She keeps shouting after us. People who are different than us make us uncomfortable. People who are marginalized make us uncomfortable. Send her away. Get rid of her. And then he says something really interesting. "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." He's saying here that he's called to minister to the Jewish folks and not to the Canaanite folks. Now, it's important for you to realize that this is a pivot point in the Gospel of Matthew. If you take this dot by itself, it sounds kind of awful because this isn't the inclusive Jesus that we know. And so I want you to notice, because there's a pivot here in the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus' ministry has been focused on Jewish folks before this, but it's about to expand and embrace a larger picture, because he says, I've come to minister to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, but then he pivots. She came and knelt before him, saying, Lord, help me. That's a good prayer. How many of us have prayed, Lord, help me? That's a good one. And he answered, and this, if you really look at this, this sounds kind of smart ass or smart aleck. My apologies. I got to be in pastoral mode here. So it sounds kind of smart aleck. It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Is he calling her a dog here? What's he doing? This is upsetting, which is why you won't hear this scripture preached a lot from a lot of pulpits, because it's a little bit upsetting. But she doesn't, I mean, is he insulting her? What's going on here? And she says, yes, Lord, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. At this point, we see Jesus' ministry expand drastically. In the rest of the Gospel of Matthew, he's no longer going to just be ministering to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. They are certainly included. They're an important dot in the painting. But the view is going to get much more expansive, and by the end of the Gospel of Matthew, the last verses are going to say, go ye therefore to all nations, preaching the gospel. All nations. So it's here we witness this pivotal point in Jesus' ministry, where the camera pans back and you get the bigger picture. And Jesus answered her, Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish. And her daughter was healed from that moment. This reminds me of the story we dealt with in a 2-sermon series, where the woman sneaks up behind Jesus and touches his cloak, and she's healed of the menstrual issue that went on for 38 years or 12 years. What was it? 30? I can't remember. But it went on for a heck of a long time. And then in that same story, you have Jesus interrupting the funeral and healing Jairus's daughter. I'm reminded of what Reverend Dr. Irie Lynn Sessions says about that the woman had to get herself in the vicinity of the healing. I think we see that with this woman, this unnamed Canaanite woman this morning. She's being persistent. She's getting herself in the vicinity of the healing. She's not going to let him turn his back on her. And I want to call out Jan Richardson's piece about this, because I think it captures this energy of getting in the vicinity of the healing. Jan Richardson writes, Don't tell me no. I've seen you feed the thousands, seen miracles spill from your hands like water, like wine, seen you with circles and circles of crowds pressed around you and not one soul turned away. Don't start with me. Don't give me this lost sheep in the house of Israel stuff. Don't give me this dog stuff. I'm saying you can close the door, but I will keep knocking. I will keep knocking. You can go silent, but I will keep shouting. You can lighten tighten the circle, but I will trace a bigger one around you. You see that camera going panning back to the hole? Around the life of my child, who will tell you no one surpasses a mother for stubbornness. I'm saying I know what you can do with crumbs, and I am claiming mine. Every morsel and scrap you have up your sleeve. Unclench your hand, your heart, your kardia. Let the scraps fall like manna, like mercy for the life of my child, the life of the world. Don't you tell me no.